Hello, good evening. So today we will start with introduction to web security, web exploitation. Yeah. So my name is Rohit Prashant, and I'm from Team BIOS, from web exploitation category. So yeah, we will move on. Okay. So in today's video, we'll be covering about web architecture, client side, dev tools, server side, HTTP request and response, URL, and cookies. So we got pretty much basic topics in here. And moving on. Okay. Web architecture. So everyone seeing this, even all the people who is seeing this, has visited a website. Even this video is being hosted in YouTube, youtube.com. So we actually go to youtube.com, and from there we see the video. Now, how this works? Have you ever thought how this works under the hood? Okay, yeah. So when you go to a browser, so let's say Chrome or Edge. If you go to your Chrome and when you type the URL, so let's say the URL happens to be www.youtube.com. What happens? When you click enter, you get the YouTube website, right? But what's happening behind? So when you click enter, there happens to be something called request, and that's called HTTP request. This request goes from our browser, from our computer, to the server, to the corresponding server. So when you're searching youtube.com, what happens is the request goes from your browser to the server of YouTube. And from there, some process happens there. The processing happens, and after that, you get the output. And that output is the HTTP response. And that's what you see in your website, in your browser. So when you go to the YouTube and when you click a random video, what happens is you actually send a request to them and they give the response, and the response that you get is the video you see in the browser. Yeah. So if you want a basic analogy of how this thing works, so let's say you went to a restaurant and you sat there and the waiter comes in and he gives you the menu and you says the food you want. Let's suppose the food to be biryani. So when you order this, what happens is the waiter writes this in his book and he goes to the kitchen and he speaks to the chef or about this food you want, and you get the food back. So the food that you want, the when you say you want biryani, that happens to be the request. You can take the analogy in that one, and yeah, and you get the response, and that happens to be the food you get. Moving on. Okay. So here's a basic representation how the request and how this works. Okay, so when you go to the browser, when you type, let's say the example given here happens to be factorbytes.com or any of the website, you type in the URL. So yeah, if you go here, let's suppose www.youtube.com. Yeah. So when you do this, what happens? There happens to be a request going on, and this is the request that you see. And this is the web server of the YouTube or any other website. And the web server has its own logic, its calculations, its own code process happening behind, and static content, images, videos, etc. And there is something called database. Now, what is a database? Database, we will come to the topic later. But for now, we will just understand database holds tons of data inside it. And there happens to be a transfer between this. And here it processes and it sends you the response. Okay, good. Yeah, moving on. Yeah. So users, this is typically us. And yeah, when you send something request, it collects the data and front end. And what is front end? So front end is what you see in the browser. So this UI, everything what you see here is the front end. What users see is front end. And front end is made up of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And yeah, uh, there will be a request sent and the web server. And here you have the database. The exchange of data takes place here. And the web server will be containing the file systems too, HTML, CSS, images, videos, etc. And you get the response back. And yeah, that's what you see. Okay. Now, client side and server side. So some fancy terms, right? Client side and server side. By this term, we must have understood what it is, client and server. Okay. So client side. Now, client side is what you see. So we are the client. When you are sending something in the browser, we are the client. So whatever you see here is basically the client side. So the display or takes place on the client browser and includes what the user sees, like text, images, the UI, any actions in the browser. Marker languages like HTML, CSS are interpreted by the browsers. So when I type something like, oh good, you can see this. So yeah, this all what you see here is the client side. Okay, moving on. So to understand the basic representation of what a client side is, here we have client side languages. So structure, presentation slash appearance, and dynamic. So here structure. So we before we have talked about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Now it involves everything the user interacts with and sees on the screen. So when you visit a website, what happens is the browser downloads the web page content, that is your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from the web server, and then it processes it and executes. What happens is when you get the response, what happens is you get the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the browser, let's suppose that happens to be the Chrome, and this Chrome processes this HTML, CSS, JavaScript from the server and it displays to you. That's what you see in the screen. Okay. Now, yeah, HTML is basically the structure of how your website is. So when you visit a website, there will be a specific structure for it. So that's what HTML does. Now, the colors, the font size, the font color, and everything, the appearance and the presentation, what you see in the website, like the width of the box, the height of the box, everything. The CSS adds that. So the role of CSS is to make the appearance better. So CSS is what gives you the appearance. And next thing is dynamism action, JavaScript. So you must have seen that when you go to a website, you can click a button. So when you click a button, there happens to be some sort of manipulation happening. So this is done using JavaScript. So recapping what's happening, when you actually go to a website, what happens is you get the response, and the response consists of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And this thing is rendered by the browser. And that's what you see in your laptop or computer. And HTML is the structure, CSS is the appearance, and JS is the dynamism. Now, dev tools. Okay. So, dev tools, what are dev tools? So, these tools actually help web developers understand what's happening on the client side of the web. Like every modern browsers right now has dev tools in it. So, dev tools, you can say dev tools as browsers hidden weapon. So, moving on, yeah, when you visit a website. So, here I have visited a sample website. And when you go to your, so when you right click on your mouse, you will see something called inspect, view source, and bunch of some options here, back, reload, save as, many options. Like that, here you have two options, view source, inspect. So here we'll move on to the inspect. So yeah, there are some many complicated things that comes here. You can see, yeah, there are many things might confuse you at the beginning, but it's pretty simple and understandable. So here we have some tabs here, elements, console, sources, networks, performance, memory, application, security, and many more. So yeah, this all have their own features in it. And yeah, okay. Now you see something here, doc type HTML. They have HTML and many codes here. We'll go through this. If you click on this arrow, what happens is it goes down, or you can continuously. So when you do this, the corresponding node that will be expanded. And here you can see the code of this particular front website, what you see here, front end. So HTML. So this is how HTML syntax works. Here you declare it's HTML, then you have head, body, uh, and yeah. So here basically in head, you actually defines what the title is. So here the title is example.com. That's what you see here. So when you open the tab, you see something called example.com. That's what you see here. And here you have style. Now, what is style? Now, this typically contains your CSS. Now, we have explained that what CSS means is CSS actually describes, like it gives your website the appearance. Now, here you have the corresponding CSS for this website. And going down, you have body. Okay. So what you see here, this example.com and this example, like this domain is used for use in illustrative examples. Everything what you see here is here. So this is the corresponding code for that. So let's say if I make some changes here. Hello. Okay. Okay. So when I click enter, you can see that it got changed. So why did it change? Here I have changed the corresponding HTML code here. And here you have H1. Now H1 is something called heading. You have H1, H2, H3, minimum. And P. P means paragraph. And here you have anchor, href, and the corresponding website. So when you click on this website, you go to the this uh, website. Now why is that? Here the corresponding HTML code says this. Anchor tag href and this corresponding with URL. And when you click on more info, that is when you click on this more info, what happens is you go to the website. You go to this website. So here I can change this code and I can give my website here. So here I am actually manipulating this thing. Okay. Yeah. So when I click this, what happens? It redirects to YouTube.com. Okay, so this is what elements does. So elements basically shows you what this corresponding page has. Now moving on to console. So when you go to console, you see some sort of errors or something like this. So this is basically where you execute that JavaScript. So let's say you are a web developer and you're developing your website. Okay, so when you have some debugging things in your JavaScript, you can actually use this console. So a basic syntax for printing something, you can do like console.log hello world. So this is a JavaScript syntax. So in this console, you can run JavaScript, your JavaScript code. You can run any JavaScript code here. And when you click enter, you can see hello world. So this is the corresponding JavaScript code for this. And we have top and okay. Moving on, sources. Okay. Now when you open this website, you can see some page, one page tab. Then after that, you can see example.com index. So basically, what it means that this example.com currently has this page in this. So that's what you see. This is what you saw in elements tab. So the sources, and here you can debug how this thing works. So when you are a web developer and you have to debug something, you can go to the source tab and you can debug what's happening. And yeah, the network tab. Okay. So currently in network tab, we can see that it shows recording network activity. Perform a request or hit Control R to record the reader. So this network tab, what it does is what are the request and response? The request and response that's being sent through this website will be appearing here. So let's say when I refresh this page. Okay, so when I refresh this page, what happens? We have seen that before. A corresponding request will be sent to a server. Okay, now the request. This is the request that's being sent to a server, and response we got it here. So we can see request headers. We'll come to this part later. The response headers and request headers. And yeah, here we have the preview of how the site is, and here we have the response. So you have sent actually this request to the web server, and the web server responded with this code to you, with and along with the corresponding headers here. And this is what the request is. So when you move to let's go to some complex website like Amazon. Okay. So in this website, what you see is there are tons of buttons, options, images, slides, etc. Right. So when you go to this request tab, the short form to get inspect element of the dev tools is Control Shift I. So when you click Control Shift I in the keyboard, you can open your this thing, inspect element. And from there, you can see the corresponding code, the corresponding HTML code in this elements. And in console, you can see bunch of many, you can see here there happens to be some error. And warnings, you can see many things here. And source. Yeah, moving on to networks. So when I refresh this page, what happens? So this all are the request and response that I'm getting. So this all are the response I'm getting. So here you can see if I will take one example here. I will open this. Yeah, you can see in the response I got this particular image. If you go down, you can see that image will be somewhere around here. So all these images that you see here came from the web server. And you can understand what all came from the web server and what all you have sent through this tab, through the network tab. And when you click on any other this thing, and here you can see the corresponding headers that you have sent. Now, if you're still confused of how the request works is, basically you are sending a letter. Let's suppose like you are sending a letter to the server. Like, hello, I am requesting this website. I want this website in my browser. So that's how request works. So you are sending a request to the web server. It's basically like you are sending a letter to the server. And the server says this, okay, yeah. So I'll be giving you this website. And he gives the response. The server gives the response, and that's what you see. So when I go to Amazon.com or something, when I click enter, what happens is this there are many requests that goes to the server, and the server sees this and it processes this and it gives out you the responses. Okay. Now next we will move on to the application. Now application tab under application there are many options here. We will look through some important and much more needed things here. And yeah, here we have storage tab, cookies, local storage, etc. Okay, here we will move on to the storage. Here we have something called local storage. Now, what is local storage? So local storage you have some you have default key value pairs in here, and here you have cookies. Yeah, so these are the corresponding cookies which I have right now. And yeah, there are tons of storages you can see. And we have storage tab. Yeah. So this local storage stores some sort of information, and this information will be stored in your browser. And cookies. Now, what are cookies? So, cookies are basically something that's stored in your browser. So, many of you, like when you visit a website, you can see like there will be an option called accept the cookies. So, you must have wondered what this cookies is. The first thing that comes to our mind might be the real cookies which we eat. But in browsers terms, what happens is cookies get stored in this browser. We will look into what cookies is in the next upcoming slides. So here you have the corresponding cookie for this browser, for this website. And yeah, this is the name, value, domain, and the parameters. Okay. Oh yeah. Now yeah. So we'll recap what we did here. So elements. When you go to the element tab, what happens is it goes to the inspect, and you can edit the corresponding HTML or CSS code of that. And console. It runs the JavaScript, and you can view the logs. Like if you're a developer, you can run your JavaScript there, and you can understand what's going on. Then sources. In sources, you can debug the JavaScript code. So when you're developing something and you got some error or you don't know what happens here, you go to the source and you can debug what's happening under it. And yeah, next you have the network tab. Network tab, as we have seen, you can monitor the network request that sends and receives. And you have the application. So application manage web storage and resources. And that's what this is. The cookies and the local storage that goes stored in the process. Yeah. Okay. So since we have moved on to this, so now we have covered some basic steps of what's happening in the browser. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. So we will be sending you a link here, and in this link, there are three flags. Now we know what flags is, right? So flags are something like for one set of strings. So it's basically strings, and this strings is given somewhere in this website. So from the previous concept which we have learned, you can go through this website and you can check where the corresponding flag is. There are actually three parts of flag here, and it will be there somewhere in the website. So we'll be sending you the link. So this is the challenge we get. So uh, you can take 2 minutes or 5 minutes of time. Okay, yeah. So when you get some website like this, and this website says, okay, the flag is hidden somewhere in this website. Can you find it? And you have good cat me. Here, I have eaten your flag. Okay, so as a ethical hacker, what do? You actually dig to what this website contains. So there might be some hidden informations that's there in this website. And we call for temporary for right now, we call this hidden information as flag. So there are basically three hidden informations inside this website. So as a normal user, okay, when you get this website, what do you do? So let me click on this image, nothing happens. Let me do control A, nothing happens. So there is no button or there is nothing to interact with. So let me boot up inspect element. So how do you open inspect element? You click right click, and from there you have inspect. Yeah, great. Okay, so you have the elements tab here. Now let me move on to the source code. I mean the HTML code. Yeah, you can see something here. There is nothing we understand from here. There is no hints here. Okay, so if we move on to this part, script dot slash static slash script dot js. And here we have dot slash static slash style dot cs. Now, what this corresponding code do in this website? So, what happens is in your HTML, you can actually define which CSS file is needed, which JavaScript file is needed. So that you actually define in the head of the HTML. In, so HTML starts with HTML, you have head, and here you can give your corresponding title. Hello. And here you can actually give your corresponding JavaScript or CSS here. And this head contains typically your data. So here you can give your meta caption, here you can give the timing, here you can give the title, here you can give the script, and here you can give the corresponding CSS. And next we have something called body. So before moving on to the body, you have to close this head tag. Okay. Yeah. Now the body contains what you see in this website. So if I'll do something like so before we spoke H1. Now what is H1? H1 is heading. So here if I type this is heading. This is heading. And you have to close the corresponding tab. So when you open this typical file, what happens is you will see something called this is heading. And from there, here you can do slash. And this is how simple HTML code looks like. So if I will save this as something, so, okay, yeah. Yeah, so here we saw that there is some links here, href, src, and src. Yeah, here we have an image.png. Now what this does? This is actually the image you see. So when you go to this particular tab, sources, do you see anything? Here we won't see anything because this is the HTML page, HTML code here. Now the network tab. Now let me reload this. Okay, so why do we reload this? When you reload, you get the request will be sent again. So at that time, this captures all the requests that's up. So when you click on this, you can see many tons of data here. Request URL, request methods, status code, remote address, etc. And moving on, you see something, yeah, X found. part. So this is part three. So what we got right now is part three. So we got something part three, and let's save this. So I saved the part three. Now what is this? This is the response header. So when you send the request, you got some response, right? From the server, you got response, and the server has sent you this corresponding flag. So we got this here. Now, where will be the part two or part one will be? So moving on to the elements again, we see something called slash style.css. So let me move to slash style.css. Yeah. So rather than clicking here, you can go to the okay, you can go to slash style.css. You can see, yeah, you can see the corresponding CSS. You can see the corresponding CSS code of the website. So here I have defined something called body and background color, the corresponding background color, font family. And if you go down, you see some things as yeah, CSS is good, but part one. So we got the part one. Okay. So here, let me say the part one. Now we got the part one. Now where is the part two hidden? So similarly, how we access style.css, there is something called slash static slash script.js. Now if I do something like that, okay. So you see here the real flag. Okay. Now this is the part two. And yes, now combining this, you get a flag. So this was the answer for this solution. Now if you go to the console, yeah. Here, if you go to the console, you can see that looking for the flag. Now, how did this work? So when we go to the corresponding JS, the script.js what happens is you can see this was the function that got executed, and because of that function got executed, that got logged in the console. So the basically the function was window.overload function console.log. We have seen what console.log is. So in JS, basically console.log is if you will give any parameter here, like just print it to the console. It will give any string. So here the string was looking for the flag. Okay. So this was basically an easy challenge. Oh, this one. Okay. Now moving on. Server side. Okay. So I have explained to you what how a request works. It goes to the server. The request goes to the server. Now, what is a server? How the server works? So, server side refers to all the operations and process that happens on the server. Now, which is the computer that hosts a website or web application. So, when you say server, it can be your laptop. Your laptop can be a server. Your computer can be a server. Now, the server is responsible for processing requests, interacting with database, executing the scripts, and sending the necessary data back to the client. That is your browser. So when you visit a server, what happens is there will be some code in the server, and there will be corresponding PHP code. There can be Python code, Java code, any code. It depends on what language the server is using. So when you send something like "Hi," the server says, "Okay, you got hi from the I got hi from the client." Now it will process according to the code that we wrote, and when it processes that, it sends the response. So this happens in the server. So it refers to everything that happens in the server instead of the client. Now, including rendering dynamic web pages, interacting with database, file systems, and many more. Now, this data passes back and forth between client and server, and scripts can run on both sides. So basically, everything that you access in the website, the data is getting passed through the client and server. So that's what you see. And here you have seen, we can see that Apache, Nginx, Unicorn. These are some servers. Okay. Uh, Wait, databases. Okay. Now, people who are studying in first CBSE would have come across SQL, MySQL. Now, what is MySQL? So you have heard some term like database. Now, what is database? Database is something that stores your information, like your data, like this organized collection of data that is stored typically on a computer system, that is server. Now, this database happens to be in the server. So, yeah, some examples of database can be MySQL, SQLite. PostgreSQL, etc. There are tons of many other uh, things other than MySQL. And yeah, database usually controlled by database management system, DBMS. And most database use structured query language, SQL for writing and querying the data. Now, MongoDB is an example for NoSQL database. Now, basically, you'll go to MySQL and you'll be having session of that tomorrow. And yeah, MySQL, SQLite, PostgreSQL. So let's say you have visited Instagram. You have visited Instagram profile. Now what happens there? So when you visit there, there will be corresponding images, many images, video, reels coming in your phone, right? Now how will this come? Now, every video, every images that you see is stored in the server, and this thing is stored in the database. So everything that you see is stored in the database. So this databases basically sends the data to the server, and the server sends the response back. Okay, it's lagging. Yeah. So if you go to the previous slide here, we can see that. Yeah, here we can see that what happens when you send the request, it goes to the server, and you see some arrows are going towards the database and arrow going towards the web server. So here the web server will be doing some logical calculation steps here, and this every data is taken from the database. The database holds your data. It holds your password. It holds your username. It holds every content that you watch, every chat you have. This everything is holded in the database. Yeah, moving on. Now, what are some server-side languages frameworks? So you must have heard of something like PHP, Node, Ruby, Flask, etc. And these are some languages that is used in server-side basically. Server-side languages are basically programming languages that runs on a web server, managing the logic, database interaction, and content generation for web application before sending it to the client's browser. So I have mentioned that some sort of logical calculation happens in the server, right? So how does this happen? This is being done by some programming language. And this programming language is what you see here. There is PHP, there is Node, there is Ruby. Node is basically JavaScript. And there you have, and next you have Flask, and Flask is built with Python. So this is how it's coded at the server. So these are some basic programming languages. Now next one. Okay. So when you go to the browser and when you type the URL, you can see some sort of when you type youtube.com. Let me type okay youtube.com. When I type this, I just typed youtube.com, right? But when you click on this URL, you can see something called https colon slash slash www.youtube.com. Why? What is this? What happens here? Now, this is something what how typical web URL looks like, and there are many parts here. So this is what we saw right now. HTTP, HTTPS is what we saw in YouTube, and this is HTTP. And here we have the domain. Now the domain is what you enter in the URL. You just enter the domain. So if I want to type Amazon, so I will just type Amazon.com or Amazon.in. And this gets resolved to http colon slash slash www.amazon.com. And here you have something called port, then path, HTTP parameters, and now what all are this? Okay. Um, Here we have protocol. Okay. Now what is HTTP protocol? Now what are protocols? So yeah, um, HTTP protocols. Now protocol is something that specifies how data should be transferred between the client browser and the server. It defines the rules for communication. So just like if you are sending, if you want to contact with your principal or someone in the school, what happens? You basically send a letter, and this letter can be termed as a protocol. So this letter you have to write a formal letter. When you are sending some letter to your friend, you can write it as an informal letter. So this is the basic analogy of this. So there is some set of protocols that need to be followed when you are typing the URL. When you will type HTTP, this is the corresponding protocol that is being used. And basically we have two types of protocols here, HTTP and HTTPS. Now, if you visit any sites right now, you can see more HTTPS in it. Now, what is S? There is an extra S, right? This S stands for secure. In more, before it was HTTP. That's not that secure. And when you do HTTPS, it's more secure. Now, next we have domain name. So this is what you enter, the website's name. It is the address of the website you are trying to access. So when you're trying to access YouTube something or YouTube or Amazon, you type that and that's the corresponding domain. Next, you have something called port. This you see very often. If you'll go to some other website, you can see something called colon 1137 or any other numbers. Now, what these numbers represent? So this is basically a port. Now, port is virtual point through which network connections are made. So basically, in a server, there can be 0 to 655535 number of ports, and each port can run different services. And let's say you have 5 ports. These 5 ports can write 5 different websites, 5 different things, and this is on the server. So here you are actually typing 80. So when you type this 80, what happens is it goes to this corresponding port of that server, and there it accesses exam block. Now next you have path. Okay, so when you visit a website, you can see something like exam.com slash the path. Now what is this path? Now path indicates the specific resource, the page, the file or directory on the server that you want to access. Now, if you'll go to any website, if you'll go something like let me visit the website. Yeah. Okay. So when I click select today's date, now you can see something called slash, then a big text here. Now what's this? If you look at this carefully, slash deals. Now what is this deals? This is the corresponding web page which I want to type access. So when I click on today's deal, it goes to slash deal. So Amazon.com slash deal. This is the corresponding web page for you. And that is the part. Just like how you go to the file, like if you go to this PC, if you are using Windows, when you click on this PC, and when you click on any, when you click on this PC, you will see the corresponding hard drive or some drives. So when you click on this drive, what happens is in the above you can see something like C colon slash and the corresponding file that you are trying to access. Similarly, in website you have slash the path that you want to access. Now, next moving on, we have something called question mark and some key value pairs. Now, what are these key value pairs? Now, these are called HTTP parameters. Now, this is for query, and it is a way to send additional information to the server in the form of key value pairs. So here we have seen something like, yeah, this counts widgets is equal to some sort of numbers. You can see some random numbers here, random numbers and text. Now, what is this? Now, this is the thing that I'm sending to the server. So when I click on this website, what happens is this is the corresponding HTTP parameter. Now, this is sent along to the server, and from there the server gets this and it performs the code and it gives us the response. Now moving on, we have something called anchor. This is anchor. Now the anchor or fragment point to a specific part of a section within a website. So when you visit a website, you can see something called today deals. This is the heading of the corresponding website. And then when you go down, you can see some sort of stuff like that. So if you go to typical blog page, giving an example, if you go to a blog page, you can see something called table of content or something like that. So here there will be corresponding headers there. Corresponding headings there. So when you click on that heading, it goes to the same. You will be in the same page, but you will go down and you can see the corresponding heading. That's what happens in the Hangar. You can see the corresponding title that we are visiting in the URL. So this is how the basic uniform resource locator, that is URL looks like. Now I suppose that you have a clear idea of this. Right? So this is what happens when you type in URL. Okay, moving on. Now, we have heard a lot about HTTP request and response. So I have been saying a lot about this HTTP request response. Now, how does this work? Okay, moving on. Okay, so again, I have explained you that when you visit the browser, when you go to the website, it has when you visit the browser and you go to the website, what happens is there happens to be a corresponding request sent to the server. Now, how will this request be sent? So let's say if you are writing a letter, you have a specific format, right? You have a specific format to send the letter. Like for the formal letter, you have to send first you have to write the address, you have to write the subject, then you have to write your dear sir, dear slash slash madam, then you have to write your body. Now, Similarly, web browser does the same thing. So when you send a request, you have typical format. You have basically here you have a format, and there is something called request headers. And these are the request header what you see right now: post, user agent. So let's say currently right now I'm in Chrome. This is in Mozilla. So what happens is when you're sending something, like if I'll go to example. So when I am sending a request to example.com, my user agent will be Mozilla. So what does this do? So it specifies that this request came from the browser called Mozilla. Then you have the host. You have the corresponding host. Here you can see get slash host slash JavaScript. We'll move on to that. Now this is the request that you see, and it gets sent to the server. Now this will be the server of the corresponding website, and the server processes this and it sends the response. Now this is the response what your browser gets. Now the Chrome, when you visit Chrome, what happens is this is the thing that Chrome gets, and this parses in the client, and that is what you see. The UI, what you see is being processed by the browser, that's sent by the server. Okay. Now there are tons of request methods: get, post, head, delete option. Mainly, we see get and post here. And if you go to the previous slide, what happens is here you have something called get. Now, what are these request methods? Yeah. So get request method, it is used to request. You can see login page. You can see the username and the password. So you have to enter your username and password. Right? So let's move, let me type Instagram. Okay, so here somewhere you will be having a login page. Okay, so in the login page, what happens is you have the corresponding username, you have the password. So when you will type your username and password. So when you click enter, when you click submit, when you click the button login, what happens is this is sent as a post request. Why? Why is the reason that this is sent as a post request? Because you are sending a data, you are sending username and password to the server, and this is being sent as a post request. And get request, well, when you actually access a website through UI. So let's say if I'll go to such a website, again, now visiting a website. What happens is this is the get request here. Now the other request head delete option. So delete request, what basically it does is it deletes a resource from the server. So when you send this corresponding request, it actually deletes a resource from the server. It has the valid permissions. Next, we have something called head. Now, head is similar to get, but it only retrieves the headers. It doesn't give you the body or content. So when you send something head request, it will only give you the um, headers, the corresponding headers. It doesn't give you the HTML part. It doesn't give you the body. And next we have options. Now what is options? So options is basically a method to ask the server which HTTP methods and other communication protocol you can use, and that is available for that particular resources. So when you send a request by option, it gives you a response that what all HTTP methods that you can use for the further. There you go. Now the request structure. So we have learned about how to send a informal or formal letter. We have a specific format. Similarly, we have some specific format for request structures. So here we have post slash http slash 1.1. Now, what is this http? We have seen this before. Now, host, localhost 8000. And yes, user agent. We have seen what user agent is, and accept. There are many headers here. So if you open a website and if you try to catch up this what this header is, you can see tons of headers. And we have connection keep alive, content type. We'll move on to the basic headers here. There will be something called cookie, and we'll move on to cookie later. And here we have the content type multi-part slash form data. and the content length. The content length basically means the body. What you see here will be the content. Okay, next you have responsible. Now, what is responsible? Now, when you visit the website, you might sometimes see 404 error, 505 error, 500 error, that is internal server error. So when you see something called an error 500, that means it is the error for the server. The server has some errors and it replied with you the response code 500. So when you visit a website, you can actually see the corresponding response code of that. So let me visit a website. So we have visited example.com. Now let me go to the network tab. And when we reload it, we can see that, yeah, we can see corresponding tabs here. So we have headers, cookies, request, response, etc. So if you go here, you can see something called response headers, and you can see the request headers. Now, request header we have seen once that before. So this is the request which I have sent to the server. Here you can see accept, host, user agent. So I have sent this from Mozilla. So Firefox. So this is what the user agent is. Okay. Yeah. Now we have got the response. Now you can see the status code 304. So what is 300? Status 300. So if I'll move on and if I'll check, yeah, 300. Anything that starts with 30, X can be any number 1 to 9. So here we can see this is a redirection code. Now what is a redirection? So when you go to your website, it can get redirected. So when I went to this website, what happened is it got redirected to some other website. So that's what you see here. That got redirected. That is 3.4. And here we have 100. That is informational code. So informational codes are like response that indicates that the request was received and is still being sent, still being processed. So the client should continue waiting for the final response. So when you see something like 100, it's like you have to wait for the server to send something. Next, you have 200. So this is what you see every time. So if I again, if you will take the example of Amazon data, uh, okay, yeah, you see something in bold green. Next, what's this? 200. So what this 200 means? 200 means success. So it basically meant that this the request what you have sent is success, and you got the response, and the response happens to be success, and that's why this is 200. Now next we have client error codes, 400. So when you have some problem with the client side, what happens is you get the error 400, and the client side error starts with 40 x can be from 100. Next, we have server error, and that's what many of you have seen when you visit a particular website. You can see that 500 internal server error. So that typically means that the server has got some error, and that's what being displayed. So you can understand that when you see 500, it means server error. Okay. So we have seen how request headers is, how request structure is. Similarly, the server also follows a set of like a type of format for sending the response, and that is called response. And here we have the HTTP 1.1 200. We know what this 200 is. That is the status code for success. And the website, I mean, the server will be sending you the corresponding headers, the date, the content type that the server is sending to us, and keep alive server, the server that is, which is mentioning which server is used, the user. So basically, this came from an Apache server. And set cookie, we have something called set cookie. So this server is actually requesting you to set cookie in your browser. That's what you see in set cookie. Then you have transfer encoding. Many headers here. Then you have the body. Now this body contains the HTML corresponding HTML code of that. So yeah. When I went to this, you can see that I got the response header, corresponding response header. So this part, what you see here, this part, response header, this is being sent by the server to me, to the browser. Now the browser rendered this and it gave me the corresponding response. Yeah. So here you can see the response. I'll click here. This is one of the response that I got from the server. That was this image. So if you search deep here, you can see that image here. Yeah, this was the image that you saw. So this I got from the server, and here you can see it's 200. That means I have successfully received this, and yeah, This is what the response is. So the corresponding header for that response was this, and what I got from the response, main thing which I got was this uh, picture. So all these pictures and videos, right now you're seeing a video, this video, everything comes from the server. And you can see the corresponding response of that particular thing. Okay, moving on. Now, coming to cookies. Now, what is cookies? So here we have explained something like set cookie, right? Now, what is cookie? So if you go to your inspect element, let me go to inspect element again. Let me go to storage. Okay, you can see many cookies here. Now, what are these cookies? Now, cookies are something that's stored in your browser. Now, your browser will be having some cookies, and this will be stored here. Now, what are these cookies used for? So let's see right here. Small pieces of data that a server sends to a user's web browser. The browser may store the cookie and send it back to the same server with later requests. Now, cookies, what happens is when you send a request, let's say, let's take an example of Instagram itself. Yeah. So you have Instagram. So let me type a dummy username. Hello, world, and my password. Okay. So what happens is when you log in, what happens is this corresponding username and this corresponding password will be going through the request, and this request will be reaching the server, and server will check, okay, this whether this username has the corresponding password. Now let's say the password happens to be correct. Now it will be sending you something called cookie, set cookie. Now what is this set cookie? Now here we have seen that this will be how the response of the uh, server look like. So here it will be sending you the cookie, and this cookie will be stored. Okay, so next time when you visit Instagram.com, you don't have to log in. Now, what is the reason of that? So when you have logged in there, the server has sent you some cookie. So basically, you can think like this: you have an ID card. So when you enter your college or school, let's say you're in a school and the security checks for your ID card. So the first day of your school, let's say you're a new student in the school. So you go there. So since you are the new student, you don't have an ID card. You go there, you register with your name, you register with your everything, and you get a corresponding ID card. So next time when you come to the school, you have to just show the ID card and you can get it. Now you can think cookies as ID cards. Now where is this ID card stored? It's stored in this browser. That is, the ID card is with you. So you can see what your cookie is. So here you have corresponding cookies. So when I log in, the server will send me a cookie to store in my browser. So you can see that there will be a cookie stored here. So next time, what happens is when I send the request, the cookie also will be sent along the request, so that we can the server can understand. Okay, this is the cookie which I gave, and it's correct, and it will log you in. So the next time you visit Instagram.com, you don't have to log in again. Yeah. Now, the cookies are used for session management, authentication, tracking, etc. So what I have shown you is some sort of session management. Next, we have set cookie header, and we have seen what set cookie header is from the previous slides. Yeah. Okay. Then next we have cookie header is used to send cookie to the server. So when you send the request, there will be a cookie sent through it. Okay. Now why do we use cookie? Now, HTTP is basically, so I have explained you what HTTP request and responses. So when you send a request, when you keep sending a request, this web server need not to know that it's coming from your laptop or your computer. It's basically, it's not state. So HTTP is basically a stateless connection protocol. What it means that it doesn't know it's coming from you. So the server cannot differentiate between different connection of different users. Let's say the user A have sent a request, and let's say the user B has sent a request. So it doesn't know that the user A has sent the request or B has sent the request. So to know that it's being sent by A or B, we use cookies. And cookies is basically like, okay, hello, my name is Rohit, and you are sending that to the server. So basically, the server identifies you with the help of cookies. So this is how you actually need not to log in YouTube or Gmail when you try to access the Gmail once you sign in. So basically, that's stored in the cookie. Okay, now what is sessions? Now we have seen what cookies is. Similarly, it's a similar concept, the sessions. So once a client connects first time to the server will generate a set of random strings or some numbers. Now this is called something like session ID. Now this will be sent to the client as the cookie. So as I have said, when you visit Instagram.com with your corresponding username and password, you sign in. The session will be created in the server. The corresponding session will be sent as a response to you, and it will be set like set cookie, the cookie value which you have. So the next time when you send the request, this cookie is set along with the request that you send. So the server identifies, yeah, it is you, and it gives you the corresponding number. Now from then on, this session ID will identify the client connection. Now for each session ID, the server keeps some data structure and which enables the server to store data specific to the user. Now, what is the actual difference between cookie and session? So we have covered what cookie and session is. Now, what is the main difference? The main difference between a session and cookie is that the cookie is basically stored on the user side, that is your browser, your Chrome, and session is basically stored on the server side, that is the backend side. Okay. Now, cookie, when you go to the browser, yeah, so this is how you access the cookie of the corresponding website. Okay, now you have see tons of comments that are tabs here. You can see name, value, domain, path, expire, size, HTTP only, secure, etc. What are this? So we know this is the value, this is the name. This is basically a key pair, you can say key value pair. And this is the domain. This actually says the domain. So here, since the cookie is in Instagram, we can see that the domain Instagram. As the path. Path specifies the path where the cookie is, and next we have the expires, and we have the size of the corresponding cookie, HTTP only, secure. Now we'll move on to what this corresponding thing is. Okay. Now there is something called same site cookies. Now we have lags, state, and lag. So yeah, what is lags? So I'll just give you a basic definition of what lags is. So lags are the cookies, like lags cookies are the cookies that are sent when you go directly to a site, but not from other sites. And we have strict cookies which are only sent when you stay on the same site. So let's say you are in a bank application. So some of the main bank applications mainly use strict cookies. Now we know that why cookies is used. So when you go to website and the server knows these cookies and it accepts it's you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So strict. So when you are actually in a bank application, you don't want your cookie to send to the cross site web applications. Tomorrow we will be learning about many cross site requests, how different requests and how the server things works in the tomorrow session. So we will be covering more this in tomorrow session. And next we have none, cookie none, the same site cookie set as none. Now what happens is this cookie are sent with all requests, like even across different websites. So these are the corresponding value of same site. So if we go here, you can see something else. Now, yeah. Next, we have something called HTTP only and secure. Now, here, when you go to console, you can access cookie like document dot cookie. So when you run this, you can see that I access the cookie in my browser, a corresponding cookie that is stored in this site in this browser. So what is this? This is a JavaScript code. So we know that we can run JavaScript code in the console. So when I run the command document.cookie, what happens is I got the corresponding cookie here. Now, okay, yeah. So when you have something HTTP only and secure, what happens is this HTTP only prevents the cookie being accessed by JavaScript. And so when I set the cookie as HTTP only, I can't actually access the cookie via JavaScript. And next we have something called secure. Now, this when you're sending a request, you have two types of mail, two types of protocol, and the website you have HTTP and HTTPS. So anyway, if you are sending a request, the corresponding cookie will be set. But when you set the cookie here, when you set the value of this secure as false or true, what happens is the secure cookie is set when it's true. What happens is this cookie will be only sent through the HTTPS protocol. When you use the HTTPS protocol, it will be only sent it through that. It won't send to the HTTP. So these are some basic steps of what we cover today, the web exploitation. So if you have any doubts, you can drop down in comment box. Yeah, you can also, if you have any doubts, you can actually ping us in Discord or Telegram of the InCTF server. So thank you.